Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, not at all. When I started, so 10 years ago, we had a series of reports starting in 2010 with the Living Planet report. This was the first, this was the Worldwide Fund for Nature's report. And I'm sure you will all know, the headlines of that were that we had lost in a very short space of time more than half of the world's wildlife. Certainly, from the time that I first took an interest in nature, which was around the time of my 10th birthday, 1970. Between 1970 and 2010, we lost more than half of the world's wildlife. And it's such a shocking thing to realize. It's almost unbelievable. And it was followed by the State of Nature reports here in the UK. And what they showed and continue to show is that the state of nature in the UK is rather worse. 1 in 5 species now close to extinction, and 56% of our wildlife in decline. So this is really where I started, and the idea of beautiful change is really, I suppose, it's so easy to despair. The facts are painful for all of us, and sometimes make me weep. But hopelessness is simply not a good strategy for making a difference. So I think we have to choose hope. And there's something about flowers, having worked in horticulture for most of my career, something quite powerful about flowers. Simple. These are, everyone can grow flowers. I happen to be quite natural, it's what I do. I've always grown flowers. So I thought, well, I'll start there. Keep it simple. And as Anthony was saying, my start point was, I know what I'll do. I'll start a business, and I will evangelize for nature, and I'll see how many places I can go around the country and spread the word about this devastation of the natural world, and in the process encourage people to think about renaturing their gardens, if you like. I mean, most people, from all of my conversations up and down the country, many people are rather tidy in their attitudes to garden space management. And so showing people how you can create a wilder, more naturalistic garden. You don't have to give up on managing it. You can still design a beautiful wildlife garden. And so these pop-up shops have been all over the country. We were quite successful from the beginning. We were shortlisted for Chelsea Product of the Year in our very first year, and we've won awards, best buys in witch gardening. So we've had very good results, and focusing really on private gardens are really the start point. I thought, well, we can all do something, and it's very easy to do something in your immediate environment. This little table was last weekend. It's very typical of it's just the Kennet Beekeepers show, and just allows us to talk about all of these different seed mixtures and how they can be used in the garden. What's been and this picture, this is the kind of, we're constantly working on the brand. Lulu's designed a new logo, and that's the latest logo, and the packaging is just changing now as well. It's been really important for me when I go up and down the country. We're not just trying to flog seeds. We do generate a small income from seeds, and it's been the income generated from seeds that has allowed us to, as a community interest company, to support and foster work wherever we can, both in the garden and outside the garden. We haven't had needed any outside help. We've relied on selling seeds. We've sold well over 50,000 boxes of seeds since we started. So even as a tiny little company organization, we've made quite a difference in our small way. And it's very important to me. We just had our first grant, actually, I should mention that. Fliska have given us £200 to sow the new area outside the village shop. So, maybe this is the sign of things to come. And the picture there shows one of the events. This was at Ford Abbey a few years ago. where we've created a meadow on the side from which we can so much easier to evangelize from the center of an amazing wildflower meadow. So that's a big part of what we're trying to do as well, bring it to life. I thought I should show a few pictures. When you're talking about wildflowers, people immediately think of our native wildflower meadows, and this is one of the best examples. This is up at Clattinger Farm and in Malmesbury. This, in a sense, it's not really what we do. I mean, we do have native mixtures for sowing into grass, but most importantly, our ideas about gardening borrow from the wider landscape. So this sort of naturalistic approach to gardening comes from these amazing landscapes that have inspired artists and poets. They are quite sensational. And if you've not had the chance to see, this is Clattinger Farm, but this is I think this one was at North Meadow up at Cricklade. They are really quite remarkable, not just for the diversity of flower, but for the insect life that is attracted. And you will see not just butterflies in their ones and twos, but clouds of butterflies. And you think this is what our countryside once looked like. Interestingly, now we only have, you'll know this statistic, it's a very widely used statistic, 98% of our wildflower meadows have gone since 1930, Second World War, somewhere around there, since the advent of modern agriculture. And it's another figure, 98%. What does that mean? And I read that we have about 25,000 acres of these wildflower meadows left. What that means, of course, is that we have lost, destroyed, wantonly destroyed, through neglect, through intensive agriculture, through the spread of urbanization. These landscapes have been lost. About 1.25 million acres of this landscape has gone. And when you think that every 1 acre of that remaining 25,000 acres supports, scientists tell us, produces 3 million flowers every day, around a kilo of nectar a day, and will feed about 96,000 visiting bees. It's just immense. So it's an interesting thing that we've lost so much of it, and frankly, I don't see any signs that 2% doesn't seem likely to become 3% in the near future. We are hanging on to these fragments of, essentially bits of land that have been difficult to manage intensively, have just kind of, got away with it. It's interesting as well with these flower meadows that people often talk about. People of a certain age will talk about how they are reminded of their childhoods, something very evocative and about these wildflower meadows. And of course, that will be the case for fewer and fewer young people. And there is what is referred to as an extinction of experience, a shifting baseline. What we now regard as normal is so far from what was once normal. And it's something that troubles me greatly, particularly with regards to the next generation. I think if I could say that there is one thing that we regard as a mission, it is making nature a normal part of childhood again. What if we could make this a really commonplace thing for the next generations? So we're doing quite a lot of work with this area of sort of conservation meadows, but most of our focus, as I said before, has been in private gardens, and telling people how they can easily achieve wonderful displays with very little very little effort actually, low maintenance, low cost. And this is a really good example of a meadow that was sown in the spring in a garden up in North Yorkshire. And you're seeing it here in July. So within just a few months, you go from soil to a breathtaking display. Actually, they are joyful and jewel-like. They are beyond words, actually, and the pictures never do justice to them. They shimmer, and the light comes through them. They're like, they are just. Some of you will have seen something of it, but the bigger the scale, the more spectacular they can be. Not quite so spectacular, but you don't have to have a sizable corner of a garden. You can do this in a pocket handkerchief of a garden. This is a tiny. This was lovely because the lady that bought these seeds from me as a Christmas gift for her 4-year-old granddaughter sent me this picture. So this was a little 4-year-old girl's first experience of gardening. These things stay with us for life. And in lots of little patches, this is where can we find little patches of unloved land, or right outside you can happily do the washing up and look out at this through a window box, raised beds, pots and troughs. There are endless possibilities even in small spaces, even on a patio. And a lot of these mixtures focus on beauty. Everything we do is designed for its benefit to pollinating insects. But some of them are, this one is a good example, an annual only mixture. So sown in the spring, 30 different species, all designed to flower over a 4-month period. And very, very good for cut flower displays for the house. But they, more or less, you could consider it as a flower crop. You sow it for one season, and if you didn't re-sow it, you would get a very depleted diversity of flowers. So people often sow them fresh each year, and every one of them looks different. They have a different color palette and lots of different choice depending on your preferences. And people do have very strong preferences. A number of people have said to me, "Oh, I don't like yellow." I'm sorry. Some of these mixtures are very multicolored. And then we move on to mixtures, and the vast majority of our mixtures combine not only annual, but perennial and biennial species. And this is an example of one, we call it tree foot. So it's a ground cover for sowing under trees, does very well in dappled shade, does very well in typical under tree soil conditions, often slightly denuded, rooty type soils. And so you get this flower carpet in areas which are otherwise quite difficult to manage. You can easily damage the tree in the process of mowing around it. And this is in our garden, under a very young fruit tree, sown in the autumn. And it's still in flower now, which is a lovely thing. The length of flowering season right into the autumn. This is another one of those very short mixtures, just to show you, in a sense, all of the different possibilities. They're not just a random selection of seeds all mixed up together in a very wild way. They are designed to create a succession of flowers. And this is one of the short mixtures, which doesn't grow any taller on average than about 8 inches in height, 20 centimeters. So you can imagine it's one that's very useful in public areas where visibility might be a problem with oncoming traffic, or indeed in a small garden if you don't want it getting beaten down by wind and rain. Very, very tidy in its way, in a wild kind of way. And another one of the shorter mixtures, if you were thinking about, these sometimes give the impression that the flowers have just magically popped up in the grass. This is an area where the grass has been removed in order to establish a new community of plants, and all the green is the foliage of the flowers, and there's actually no grass in this mixture. Another example again, another very tall, really colourful mixture for very dry soils and very hot conditions. It won't tolerate shade. doesn't want any real, doesn't like too much goodness, dry, rocky, stony, builder site type situations. It does really well, dry soil. And then last example really that I could go on all night, you'd be bored to tears with it, but this one is called Act Against Aphids. This is really the mixture which I think best defines what we're doing. The beauty which we can deliver is a byproduct. The functionality is all about natural control, natural balance, equilibrium in the garden. And this particular mixture is designed, often used in a veg garden or on the allotment, to control aphid populations, which are a problem increasingly. Aphid populations have increased by 60% as a result of climate change. So, you know, we have to find a way, and the way can't be using chemicals. It simply is a non-starter. So here we attract the aphids lovingly into the garden, and then we release all of their predators, ladybirds, hoverflies, lacewings, come and devour them, which is rather sad, but they're very effective at it. You know, this mixture, again, it's annual, perennial, biennial, and it's these perennial species which are particularly good at the attracting hoverflies, and they have a voracious appetite for aphids. This is kind of where we move from the garden, from the safety of the garden border. You know, what if we just did away with garden fences, and what if we looked at all of these spaces as something we can do something about, if we take back control? And this is the view from my last house in Devizes. It's a public space. It's an amenity green space. You know, it was the old railway siding in the old railway line in Devizes, and it is the case here that this has simply been mown to within an inch of its life, with monotonous regularity, year in, year out. All the vegetation, you can see the only colour there is the high-vis suit that the council operative is wearing, and their mission is to remove all vegetation, grass, and everything else. So that had to change, and so it's really at the core of what we've been trying to do, which is, how do you do that? You know, where do you start with that? And my start point has often been just doing it, you know, just getting out there and digging up bits of land and not asking too many questions. But what we did alongside those sort of guerrilla gardening efforts was to start talking to the council and to encourage a different approach where we let the wildflowers grow in the grass, and where the grass removal is limited only to paths weaving through, and a whole different approach to letting the grasses grow and seeing the benefits to wildlife of having these grassed areas. And then on the back of that, you can start to look at what else could we do in these spaces. And you know, the planting of bulbs, we know, is such a lovely thing to do. It's such a lovely day out. And when you do it on scale, here in Devizes, we planted 10,000 native daffodils in one area. So it's something which really does throw down a marker. We had 90 people out of all ages throughout the day, and it was a party. People got to speak to neighbours they didn't know exist, and it's really important. And this way of combining, here you see an area where we've created a flower in the autumn, and then sown a short mixture, so only growing about 50 centimetres in height. And there are lots of techniques. What we do is not just about flower meadows. It's really about all of these different elements to creating the most dynamic, vibrant wildlife spaces. Here we create, a friend of ours runs a business called Garden on a Roll, which is a sort of planting by numbers technique. So you just lay down the template, all of the positions for the plants are marked, and all the lovely healthy plants come in a big box. It's a great way to get people, you know, everything. If you want to get a big group of people together and manage, you know, they can all be a bit willing to do something. So this is such a useful thing. And then having done that, this was the very early stages. You can see the plants now very well established, and the local residents are taking pride in just making sure it's neatly mown around it, and it's managed like a garden. I mean, the council can't do all of that work regularly enough. And then on another part of the site, and this is the bit that most excites us, of course, we encourage the council to invest in 3 large borders right by the play area. And they came along and got a digger in to remove the turf. And we then hired here you're seeing a heavy duty cultivator, great bit of kit for really creating a nice fine tilth in what was a very good soil. And then, so that was at the end of April that we did that work. Community effort again, we even had 3-year-olds helping push the rollers along. It was really a beautiful day. And this is the first phase of flowering in that space, which was in July. And here you're already seeing 3 separate borders, each with a different focus, one for butterflies, one for bees, one for ladybirds, but all great for insects in general. And nice irregular borders with paths weaving through and through the year. And this is August. You see various species fade, and a new succession sort of comes through. They get taller and taller as they go, and right the way through to a couple of days ago, that was the scene. So still, lots of colour. It's looking a bit ragged. Some of the kids have been running through, so it's gotten a bit beaten down, but still lots of visiting insects in there. And this is really, just a series of before and afters. They're not always easy. You think, oh, I'll just dig over that bit of soil. That big lump of concrete on the right-hand side was a 4-man lift. You get a few surprises, but then fill it with seeds. First year colour, mostly annuals. You're seeing here corn cockles, sweet peas weaving up through the flowers, and oxeye daisy, of course. And then at the end of the season, that was just mowed on a high mower setting. And from then you get the second year, perennials establishing, and even more beautiful. And then some of the annuals coming, you can see still poppies, and there were cornflowers in this as well. And often the preparation is quite key with these jobs. People say, well, can I just scratch up the grass and scatter this, and will I get these wonderful displays? There are lots of things you can do to establish wildflowers in the grass, but if you want these really amazing displays, here this was just a matter of weeks after sowing, but by July, people were coming specially to see this area. This was again the Pans Lane railway bridge, which had been filled in. And mentioning community again. So what we're really focusing on is ways to get people to take interest, to come together, and to work out how these can be really not just a one-season wonder. We have to find ways of organising to really keep it going. And this is another community group that we've been very active. Well, I belonged to the group. It's the Clean Up Devices Squad, known as the CUDs. And the CUDs are litter pickers, about 50 people now in that group. But we started taking over these spaces. This was one of 2 roundabouts. Gain first year colour, focusing on annuals. And then from then, to keep it going, we're now just moving into year 5. We've moved from the annual displays into underplanting with and always lots of insects attracted, to adding bulbs and groups of plug plants, lots of alliums and wild tulips on this roundabout, and then selectively groups of plants. Lots of we used Echium on this roundabout, and Rudbeckia in various groups, Eryngium. This is a second roundabout in Devizes, very, very different. I mean, it's a completely different soil. It was already planted with a nice rowan tree and a little bit of perennial planting around the middle. So we've used a short flowering mixture. So doesn't grow any taller than about 40 centimeters, this one. Really diverse in the first year. And then in the second year, we started to again plant bulbs. And the end of the maintenance of these is really just once a year, really. I mean, there's a little bit of tinkering during the year, maybe by when you're passing by, but once a year, the cuds, like a herd of grazing animals, will take to the roundabouts and stomp about and dig up lots of things that they probably shouldn't be digging up, but there's a lot of disturbance. Animal disturbance is the necessity really for all flowering succession, and that's what the cuds do very well. And then last year, this is how you see the thing moving on, where you've got a lot of tall flowers in the center, this wonderful Phacelia plant in the middle with alliums. It just, you could stand, I did stand in the middle of this roundabout with my eyes closed on many occasions, listening to the bees. What people make of it, I have no idea. And then around the outside, using dwarf flowers. So you've got a design which is wild, and people love it. People drive the long way home. Unfortunately, we're trying to get them to cycle, but we're working on that. And this is Phacelia. It's one of my favourites. Closer to home, you'll know, these little unloved patches, they need standing up for, these bits of land. No bit of land deserves to be quite as compacted as this, driven over, unloved. And just in a few weeks, and you've seen this flowering right the way through the season, constant change. And the joy, just one little patch, but it will get people talking, and it acts as a beacon really. So for great, let's do more of it. Where else can we do it? In our gardens and beyond. And the closer you get, there's always so much interest, not just with the flowers, but you will see a lot of wildlife in these areas. And then I was in the Midlands last week, and this is a lady I've been doing a lot of work with. Lulu I was asking how long I needed to speak for, and Lulu very kindly found this. I believe this is 30 minutes, so I'm not going to talk for much longer because you will want to ask a few questions, but just a few more slides. This is Alison in the Midlands, and she started an organisation called the Patchwork Meadow with a vision. She's retired now, her career was in social care, and she wants to create 1,000 mini patchwork meadows around Birmingham. And she's already done 500. And she's now got this idea for the Commonwealth Games that she may try and get 2022 patchwork meadows going as a new target. We love these people. And it's happening all over the country. These, nature chain organizations, it's happening. And it's the only thing really that gives me a sense of hope that there's something afoot. People care. Unfortunately, it's said that around 45% of people say they care about nature, and only 1% actually do anything about it. So that's the challenge. How do we try and get more people really involved? Which is why the beauty comes in. You can't resist it. This was a project we worked with Bug Life down in Plymouth. 2 big areas, no colour to be seen anywhere in the centre of Plymouth other than this. So, it makes a big difference. Rotherham, Croydon, a school in the New Forest, and the school children that did the sowing. That's a really big part of it. Parks, all manner of different spaces. There's no limit really. This was one of the parks in Devizes. And that is my last slide. I should try and think of something inspirational to say, but it is, for me, it's this sort of sense of what example we're setting for the next generations. We just have to apply ourselves to the task with every fibre of our being. thanks for listening. You may have some questions.
Oh, thanks, Paul. That was amazing. That was very moving. And if I might say, first of all, on behalf of, I'm sure everybody, it is just fantastic what you're doing. Thank goodness you're doing this. I'm really, really knocked out by it, and I hope we're going to have some questions. But I'm trying to see if people got their hands up. Maybe I'll just start. Make this bigger. I'll just start by asking. I don't know if you can answer this, but at the very beginning, you know, when you were showing meadows and all those, you know, the fact that farmers spray their fields. Is there a wildflower mix that farmers might like, i.e., that sheep, you know, could eat, or is that counterproductive?
No, I mean there's very little. There are one or two species that farmers will be concerned about in terms of toxicity for livestock, but the issue isn't about whether they'll be safe for livestock. It is simply getting them to return to a healthier way of farming, and restoring our soils. You know, soils are, as we all know, and this is the problem with all the talks that I do. I tend to be preaching to the converted. You know, there will be no statistic I'm sure I could mention without you going, well, yeah, you know, how many years of how many harvests have we got left in the soil? But I think farmers, you know, the vast majority of farmers seem to really care about the land, I think. And I can see a lot of evidence that there is change afoot there. A lot of good examples of best practice that we can share. Certainly from our point of view, we do many different native wildflower mixtures that can be sown in the grass, whether it's in your grass in your garden or whether it's a farmer's field. So there are lots of opportunities to do it. It just needs the willingness to change the way we farm. I think sometimes the mistake is made with, you know, we tend to think of wildflower meadows as being natural environments, and that, you know, they're at their best, they're kind of semi-wild. They're the result of an agricultural practice that goes back. You know, Clattinger Farm, it hasn't, the farming practice hasn't changed for hundreds of years, probably thousands actually. So, you know, there's so much going on in the soil, which, and of course we know so little about the soil. And it's reckoned we know about 1% of what goes on in the soil. These amazing mycorrhizal.
Oops. Missed that last bit, but I think I know what you mean. The fungi in the soil.
Yeah.
Would somebody else like to ask a question? Do we have any?
Anthea, Steve here. Paul, I was just, I mean, that's all is lovely. I was just wondering, where do all these seeds come from? I mean, you've obviously got stacks of them. I presume you don't grow them yourselves. I'm not, you know, as you drive around the countryside, you're not aware of lots of fields with all these flowers growing that presumably they can harvest the seeds, but they must be somewhere. Where do they all come from?
Well, we buy quite a lot of UK harvested seed, but it is a problem because, you know, you can't lose 98% of your wildflower meadows and then have a healthy wildflower seed business. So a lot of our seed for garden use is brought in from Europe, and we work with one of the leading urban ecology companies, a company called Novaflor. We have an exclusive arrangement with, and we find that very, very beneficial because we can be both very competitive. There's a lot of seed, you know, the French are growing a lot of wildflower seeds as crops, you know, so they're grown as individual species and then mixed, as it were. But it's important as well as the what tend to be thought of as the garden mixtures. So they're some native plants and some near natives and even some exotics, but with a very strong biodiversity focus, but not to be confused with the preservation mixtures, which are 100% UK sourced. Depends what you're wanting to do, and there's a lot of confusion about it. Sometimes people think that everything should be native. Even our gardens. Well, 70% of UK gardens contain non-native plants. So we have to be I think we need to be a bit more broad-minded about it, in terms of what if the insects don't notice, then there are lots of benefits of near natives in terms of with our meadows, the ones that the meadows that are still in flower into the autumn wouldn't be if we were only using a small selection of native plants.
Yeah. No, interesting.
Yes. I'm trying to think what we should be doing to be speaking to councils. I mean, you had that was pretty easy, was it, for you in Devizes? You would imagine they'd be really up for it. That's not happening more.
None of it's really easy, is it? I mean, that you have to be 100% determined to find a way in, and I worked for many years finding all sorts of ways in, to the point now that things have changed and councils are required to set biodiversity targets, and then we need to find ways of holding them to those targets. I worked, in fact, Chris Hogg, who's been to a couple of the Nature Chain meetings, is a really nice guy, and he's the Green Spaces manager for Bradford-on-Avon Town Council. When Bradford-on-Avon announced that they were declaring an ecological emergency alongside the climate emergency that had come earlier, I tweeted to say, congratulations, and could I, in celebration of this announcement, offer you a free roundabout or verge. We will give you advice, time, seed, whatever we will create. And 2 years on, we still haven't done it, because there are some, there's some red tape. I think the bit of land we had in mind is Highways Agency, and I would, there would be some health and safety concerns, and so I think we just have to keep sweeping away all of the opposition and find ways to get the council to listen. And if that means that we just do it and ask questions later, we take back control of the land first and foremost. And when you start doing it and getting the public interested in it, the council have to listen. If people are sending letters saying, we love this, we want more of it, then they will have to listen. I was at a meeting in Westbury last night, a climate meeting, and there was a very good speaker from Bratton Parish Council, who has taken the initiative of contacting all of the parish councils to see if they're interested in putting their heads together to agree, to outline a plan. And I think there's a lot of this, this idea of, working as if indeed we were part of nature. These networks should come. We ought to be talking and working with others and making things happen. And I suppose what's positive is that I get to talk to a lot of people, and so I can say this is what we did, and this is what I would advise. Things that can be done, community groups that will have some power. If you get a really strong residents association or community biodiversity group, the council, they start to listen, and a little bit on edge about what happens when it's more than just one or two well-meaning people, and that's happening in lots of, this idea of working locally in your immediate environment and then spreading. Once you've built that confidence in your own garden, you can move beyond the garden border and then beyond your parish boundaries, and up and down the country we can network through social media. We can just there's so much good stuff happening, and we don't hear enough about it.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's very much the idea of nature chain.
It is, isn't it? No, it's a wonderful thing, and it's a. I just happened upon we're working with an organisation up in Surrey, and they have a campaign which they're calling IDOT, which is I do one thing, which is rather nice. And I do one thing, and they can say, you know, what if everyone in the UK did one thing every day? What do the numbers look like? And I rather like that with nature chain, this idea of, you know, really setting some very clear targets as to, you know, when we're talking about 20% of it, you know, let's have a look at the land. Who owns it? Who do we need to talk to? Not just, it's not just a ground up thing. We need change at a
Oh, I can't see that.
Hands up for questions. I've just been if I shut up for 2 seconds, we could have some questions.
I think Ros had a question.
Yes, I was thinking that, well, it's absolutely lovely. And I mean, I live near the galleries, so, you know, the flowers are beautiful. But as you say, you know, quite a few of them are non-native. And insects, they will feed on the nectar of many flowers, but to breed, they need their own native plants. You know, the nettles, the mulleins, the natural violets and things like that. Do you sort of give thought to how the breeding plants can be?
Yes, no, a good deal of thought to it, and I think the most important thing is that we have more of everything. For specialist insects, there is a need to provide specialist plants, you know, with which they have evolved, and so what we do is suited to certain situations where you are looking for a spectacular display and a long flowering season and masses of nectar and pollen, and there will be other areas where we're really looking at conservation work, and sometimes it's the sort of, it's how, to my mind, it's how these two areas come together. So with some of the projects in Devizes, you know, you have Quakers Walk is an 8-acre site, and our focus there is on increasing the native diversity. We're creating wildflower meadows, changing the way the council mow it. They've even invested tens of thousands of pounds in new equipment to be able to mow it differently, where they're taking away the clippings. Tomorrow I'm there, we're sowing yellow rattle. We will be looking to add native wildflowers in the spring, another few thousand, depending on how much the council are spending, but a few thousand native bluebell bulbs on the other side. So those conservation efforts, for me, have to sit alongside showstoppers that bring people on board. And this is really key, because the public are not very well informed. And so when you simply stop the mowing, you get a lot of negatives. You know, people say, oh, you know, the dogs are messing in the long grass, and there's a lot of, you know, the kids will have nowhere to play if you don't cut the grass short. And so it's finding where are the appropriate areas, you know, gardens, and if you want a cottage garden style display which will just go on and on flowering, and you don't mind if it has some cosmos in and some, you know, pretty annuals, cornflowers and poppies, that's a different thing to if you want to try and nurture the native flowers, and with a lot of those projects, it's wrong to assume that there's something missing, because usually it's just something we've been doing wrong, usually putting far too much fertility into the soil through mowing and leaving the clippings as we do, and just burying all the life that's below. But it's a really good question, Ros, and it's one that, you know, we've got quite a big following on Twitter, you know, and we do quite often get a lot of negative comments from purists who think that actually what we're doing is in some way misleading, or you know, that it's wrong to, in a way, there is a problem with the language, you know, because there are very few words that describe what we're doing. So we use we talk about wildflowers and flower meadows, and in some ways that's not quite what we're doing. So I think the language is more of a problem than anything else. And the most important thing is to use all of these different techniques. So it's not just about flowers, it's also about trees are massively important, and scaling up the tree planting efforts and putting native hedges in, and using these techniques like the garden on a roll that will bring communities together. And then you start talking, and one of the things that's happening is we with these groups, you can start introducing more citizens science projects. You know, the British Wasp and Ant Recording Society is one that we do. You know, so you start looking at what was there, you know, what's missing, and what can be reintroduced in a fairly short space of time. It's all very well for me saying, you know, that these meadows attract a wide diversity of insects. That needs to be seen and recorded. And if there are specialist insects that are not getting, you know, that don't find their larval food plant there, they have to find it somewhere else. That's really important. We would agree entirely.
Okay, is that Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's brilliant and inspirational, I'm sure, for all of us. You've probably seen on Nature Chain, there's concern about the verges in Freshford on the A36 and the fact they've been constantly being mown, and you know, no concern for wildflowers. That's of course the I think they're called Highways England these days. Have you had any experience with Highways England? Because obviously they have huge stretches of main road responsible for motorways. Yeah, if they could be persuaded to act responsibly with their verges, that would make a massive. Have you tried to work with that?
Yes, we sit slightly outside. You know, there's a limit. We're a very small player, of course, and you know, it's more or less just myself and Lulu and any friends that we can drag in to our schemes. Plant Life as a charity are very involved and are doing some really good work. So I sit on the fringes, very interested and very keen to do all that we can do. But in terms of those big questions, and we don't really have any involvement with Highways England, although we have been very involved initially with Wiltshire Council and then with this community asset transfer, where they've passed on responsibility for management to the town councils. You know, you do start to get involved with all of these discussions at some level, and the question comes, well, what can we do? What is ours to do? And the thing I've loved about observing Nature Chain is there is so much talent. There are so many skills that you think, oh, there's so many clever people out there that can do this stuff. They know how to write the right letters to the right people. And so I focus on, you know, I'm quite good at growing stuff. I'm particularly good at digging stuff up. and I love telling people about it because I care very deeply about it. And it's that combination of, well, what can we bring to the party? And what questions can we ask that might allow us to delve deeper into, you know, who do we know? Once you start, this is a wonderful network of like minds, and there's all sorts of strength that can be gathered from you know, putting out feelers and waiting to see what others are doing.
That's great, and maybe we should be talking to Plant Life about the A36.
Yes. Well, absolutely. There's so much to do, but there are constant reminders of actually we probably could start to, you know, make a difference there as well.
Okay, I don't think I can see anybody else with their hand up. And I think Paul has given us a huge amount to think about, and I'm glad to say this will be going out on the Nature Chain website soon, and even more people will be watching, hopefully, Paul, and the idea will spread. And really, it's absolutely fantastic what you're doing. And Lulu, thank you both very, very much indeed. Very
welcome. Nice to talk to you. And no, it's what I mean. We're lucky enough to have the privilege of doing something very, very lovely, very beautiful. And I've always said it kind of makes me seem more interesting than I really am. You know, we'll just keep growing stuff and talking about it. You know, and thanks for all the interest.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
See you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.